Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new, and today we are going to be conquering or attempting to conquer a recipe or recipes that I've always wanted to become proficient and skilled at, but I've never taken the time to do it, and that is donuts. We are going to be making two different kinds of donuts today. When I was looking at recipes for donuts, I found a ton of them, and I found some really cool, intricate, grand donuts that had all these fancy fillings and glazes and tops, but I told myself, rein it in. You need to master the basics first. So we are going to be making old-fashioned donuts today, which is like a cake-style donut, and we are going to be making just a plain yeasted glazed donut. We are heading to a game night tonight, and I am responsible for bringing some dessert, so I thought today would be the perfect time to try to attempt these skills and see if we can get proficient at making donuts. So one of them is a yeasted donut, and the old-fashioned cake donut is actually, it's almost like it's leavened with not yeast, it's leavened with baking powder. It's kind of like a biscuit, but not really. I did not know that. I had no idea how old-fashioned / cake donuts were made until I did a bunch of research. So I'm going to start with the glazed yeasted donut because these ones need to rise twice. And so we can get these ones going, and then we will start on our old-fashioned ones. Those need to chill for an hour before we can fry them up. So I think that it'll be perfect timing that by the time we have both of our doughs ready to go into the fryer, they will both be ready at the same time if I start with the yeasted donut. So I'm gonna make the glazed donut here in my KitchenAid. And so what we need to start with is I actually need to get some butter melted. I need to get 6 tablespoons of butter melting. I absolutely love learning new skills in the kitchen. I love learning how to make things that we usually think that to only buy at the store or at a bakery. I find it empowering, but just because I learn how to make something at home doesn't mean I always want to make it at home. It's just always fun to kind of be able to conquer that and say, hey, if I ever want donuts and I don't want to go to the store, I could whip some up. I feel like that with tortillas. I love making tortillas, but I probably only make tortillas 10 or 20% of the time we have tortillas. I love store-bought tortillas as well, but there's something empowering about learning a new skill. So here is my 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm gonna go pop this in the microwave and just melt it in the microwave. While that's melting, I'm gonna measure out 1 cup of milk. This is whole milk. And I'm gonna pop this and warm this up as well. Uh-oh. I have a hole in my measuring spoon. So I'll just put this in here and I'm gonna go warm this up, and then we can get our yeast proofing in this warm milk. So here we have our warm milk. To that, I'm gonna add 4½ teaspoons of active dry yeast, or 2 packets worth. And 1/4 cups worth of sugar. So I'm just gonna put this down, turn it on, let it mix together a little bit. I just wanna make sure all the yeast is coated in the liquid so that it can start to activate. If you're ever wondering what the difference between active dry and instant yeast is active dry yeast has a little coating around each one of the granules of yeast, and the reason why almost every recipe says when you're using active dry yeast to let it sit in the milk or water first is it has to actually dissolve that outer coating, and then the yeast can start to activate, and usually the yeast granules are a little bit bigger versus instant yeast does not have that outer shell, and the instant granules or the yeast granules are smaller, so you don't have to do that initial step of activating the yeast. You can just put your dry, your wet mixture, your yeast all into the mixing bowl, mix it together, and it'll start proofing instantly. So this is what it looks like now. We're gonna wait about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. I will link all these recipes down below, plus the equipment I'm gonna be using today. You can use your arms to mix this, or you can use a KitchenAid. but you do need a thermometer for frying the oil because you really want to make sure what temperature your oil is before you start frying them. When I was reading all the recipes and watching the videos on how to make donuts, everyone kept saying that knowing the temperature of your oil is highly important. And so while I'm waiting for this, I'm gonna go ahead and reread my old-fashioned donut recipe one more time so that I make sure that I know everything that needs to happen for that recipe. Oh, I need cake flour. Okay. Whew. I sent Josh to the store to get confectioner or powdered sugar for me for the glaze and the oil because I don't have good frying oil, and I do have cake flour. So I didn't need him to pick up cake flour. I forgot to check that before I sent him to the store. Look how beautiful that is. Okay, so now we can move to the next step. It's nice and foamy. Now I'm gonna add my flour, and my bucket of flour in my kitchen is almost out, so I just pulled out my big bucket. And we need 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm kind of fluffing my flour in the bucket first. Add in my melted butter. Then I can use this bowl to crack my eggs into. My chickens are laying again, and we are getting so many eggs. Look how big and beautiful this egg is. So we need 2 large eggs at room temperature. So now I'm gonna put this down and knead this until a soft ball forms. While this is kneading, we need 3 large egg yolks. So I'm gonna go ahead and separate that out now for the next recipe. The recipe said to finish kneading it on the counter by hand, and look how beautiful this is. It's super soft. I'm loving it. And that was a really easy dough to put together, so we're so far on the right foot. I'm just gonna knead this for about a minute or so until I get a nice ball to form. Love it. So now I'm gonna take my bowl, spray it, spray my dough ball, cover it, and I'm gonna let this rise for a solid hour or until it doubles in size. So a lot of times when a recipe says an hour or doubled in size, it really just depends on the temperature of your kitchen. If your kitchen is warmer, it'll rise faster. If it's colder, it'll take longer. So when bread baking, really looking for the cues of when to go to the next step is crucial. So now that we got that done, we can actually start on our old-fashioned batter. I decided to transfer the dough into a different bowl so that I could use the stand mixer for the cake donuts. So that's 2/3 cup of granulated sugar, and to that I'm going to beat in the butter, and this is room temperature butter, for 2 minutes. So now that this is light and fluffy, I'm gonna go ahead and mix in, let me double check. 1 cup of sour cream. Mix that in. Now I'm gonna add 3 cups of cake flour. And I realized after I made the last recipe that it does have the gram measurements on it. And if I had realized that, I would have weighed out the flour and all of the ingredients for the last recipe. But now that I'm already doing it this way, I'm just gonna continue to use my cups and measures. But I am finding the more I bake, the more I enjoy cooking with weight measurements instead of cups. It's a lot more accurate. So cake flour, what's the difference between cake flour, all-purpose flour, and bread flour? Well, cake flour has the lowest amount of gluten proteins in it, so it's gonna give you a softer textured item. All-purpose flour has a medium amount of gluten proteins in it, And bread flour has the highest amount of gluten protein in it. Because when you're making pizzas and breads, you want a higher protein content. This is nutmeg, and this is optional. But I love nutmeg, so I'm gonna add it. This is what nutmeg looks like fresh. But when you're making pizzas and crusty loaves of bread, you want that protein because that's gonna give you that signature chew and structure. And I've been baking a lot more with bread flour, my bread products, and I have noticed that they turn out a whole lot better. You get that really just delicious, chewy texture that you want. But when you're making things that you don't want to have a lot of gluten, you want them to be light and fluffy, you use cake flour. Okay, so that is our cake donut batter. I'm trying to get all of this off the paddle attachment. Now I'm gonna cover this and pop this in the fridge, and this needs to chill for 1 hour. So basically, hopefully, that one will be ready to go when this one's ready to go. Now what I'm gonna do is kind of clean up my mess, and then when both of our doughs are ready for the next step, we will go ahead and move on to the next step. Our dough has doubled in size, so, ooh, almost lost it. So we can go ahead and roll this out and shape it. I'm reading my directions to how thinly I need to roll the dough out to. It says a 1/2 inch thick. That's for the old-fashioned donuts. So for the glazed donuts, 3/4 of an inch thick. We're gonna roll out the glazed donuts too. And I'm rolling out the glazed donuts first because these ones need to rise for another 45 minutes or so before we can actually fry them. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of flour on my silicone mat. I've got my cutters out here. I don't want a ton of flour, but you can see how beautiful this dough is. Go ahead and roll it out. Not even rolling it out, I'm just patting it out. And then I need to measure this. My bench scraper has a ruler on it. Let's see. That's about right there. Now this recipe did not call for refrigeration. A lot of the recipes when I was looking up how to make donuts called to refrigerate the dough overnight or up to 3 days in advance. So if you were wanting to make donuts for guests or for a special occasion like it was Christmas or New Year's, and you have a tradition where you want to make donuts, or you want to start a tradition where you make donuts for some sort of special occasion, most of the recipes, so I'm sure even this one I could throw it in the fridge and let it rest overnight, and then you pull it out when it's cold, you shape it, you cut it into its donuts, and then you fry it after it does its second rise. Now, because I'm just trying to figure out what size I want to do. I think I want them to be that size. And because the dough is cold, it does take longer to do the second rise, but a lot of the recipes say it develops a better flavor if it's fermented a little bit longer. But we're gonna go ahead and fry these up tonight because we're gonna eat them tonight. But that was kind of interesting learning that. I did want to just thin these out just a little bit. I want to make sure the thickness is the same so that they fry up evenly. So we're not only going to make donuts, but we're going to make donut holes too. I can't believe we have something that already resembles a donut. That is an accomplishment in and of itself. I'm just gonna repeat this process. I think what I'm gonna do is go through and cut out all of my big rounds. Now, I think I could be wrong because I've never done this before. You could fry these up just like this and then fill them with cream or chocolate or something like that if you wanted to. I think I'm gonna put the donut holes in cinnamon sugar. Oh, I did not. So it does say we can re-roll this dough and cut out more donuts. This dough is wanting to spring back a little bit more because the gluten after mixing it back up. See if I can even get 2 out of here. I think with this last little bit of dough, I'm just going to make some donut holes. I think by the time these rise, they are not going to fit on this cookie sheet. Give them a little bit more room to proof. How cute are these little donuts? So now let's get our cake donuts rolled out. They have been chilling for an hour. So this is gonna have a very different consistency because it is not a yeast dough, it is a baking soda dough. But look at that color, that's from my chicken eggs. I think I'm gonna use the same size cookie cutters. I do have a little extra dough there. I think we're just going to toss that little bit of extra. So this dough is just so different. It's not quite a biscuit dough, but it's kind of similar. I need to actually get a spoon to kind of scrape it out of here. And this one, I need to roll to a 1/2 inch thickness. I'm gonna need more flour for this one. I'm not kneading this, I'm just pushing the dough together. For a second, I was like, what are all those brown specks in there? And it's the nutmeg. Okay, I think that's as thin as I want it to get. This has a totally different consistency. These are not going to proof like the other donuts, so I can just put them pretty close to each other. I actually don't think I want donut holes with these ones. These ones, or maybe we'll try them. So here are our cake / old fashioned, and we are gonna fry these ones up because we can fry these right away. These need to double in size, so they need to go for about an hour. So now that our donuts are cut out, we can go ahead and start heating up our peanut oil. That's what I'm gonna use to fry this. You can use whatever kind of cooking oil you wanna use that has a high heat point. Avocado oil, canola oil, vegetable oil, and I am using peanut oil. I also have a cookie sheet out here that I'm gonna line with a piece of parchment paper. I need to get a thermometer in that pan so we can track its temperature. We're looking for 330 for the cake donuts, and for the yeast donuts or the old-fashioned donuts, we are going to cook it at 350. So I've got this thermometer. I love this thermometer. I can link it down below because the temperature gauge is so big. You can do Fahrenheit or Celsius. And I just love being able to see the temperature so easily. It's not one where I'm squinting down and trying to see what the temperature is. So we are at 75 degrees right now. So while this is heating up, because this is going to take a while to heat up, I'm going to make the glaze for the donuts. The recipes that I'm following for both the cake donut and the old-fashioned donut have different glazes, but they're very, very similar. So I'm only going to make one glaze instead of making two when they're so similar. I think that both glazes will work fine. And this is where you can get really creative. If you have fruit powders, I'm out of my freeze-dried fruit right now, but I was thinking if I had freeze-dried strawberries or raspberries, I would powder that up and you could mix that in with the glaze and make a berry donut. I do have some chocolate ganache in my refrigerator from making a chocolate cake over the weekend. And so I think I'm gonna pull that out because Josh's favorite donuts have a chocolate frosting. So I am gonna do some chocolate frosting ones, but for just the plain glaze, I'm just gonna make one recipe. Well, I'm gonna double the recipe, but I'm just going to make one. We're at 107 degrees right now Fahrenheit. This is powdered sugar. To the powdered sugar, we're going to add milk. I'm going to start with that. I do need to add vanilla. And this is where I would add fruit powder if I wanted to make it a fruit flavored glaze. We are currently at 178 Fahrenheit. We've got a little bit more time left that we can keep working on this glaze. If I need to add a little bit more milk to thin it out, I can, because I want it very glazy. I don't want it like a frosting, I want it like a glaze. You could even add lemon juice and lemon zest to this if you wanted it a lemon glaze. Josh would not prefer that, so I'm not going to do that. I do think I need just a touch more milk. Okay, I think we're going to call that perfect. I don't want a ton of this to stick to the donuts because I want it to be super glazy. In here, I'm going to make some cinnamon sugar for the donut holes. So I'm just going to add a little bit of cinnamon, or that's sugar. Do I already have cinnamon sugar made up? I don't think so. I'm just going to eyeball that, this cinnamon to sugar ratio. That looks good. And then the final glaze or topping we're going to add or make is chocolate ganache for some of the yeasted donuts. And I have some chocolate ganache I made the other day, and it's pretty thick, so I need to thin this out a little bit. And all chocolate ganache is chocolate and cream. So what I'm going to do is put this in a glass bowl, because I'm going to pop this in the microwave and microwave it just a bit. Get as much of that goodness out as I can with just a little bit more cream so that it's a little bit runnier. So there is our chocolate glaze. I'm glad that I had that in the fridge. Now we're not going to fry up the glazed or the yeast donuts quite yet, so I might have to melt this a little bit more when we fry our donuts to just loosen it up a little bit. We need this oil at 133 for the cake donuts, which are gonna be the first ones we are gonna be cooking up, and you can see it's shimmering. One reason I have never made donuts before is because I have never had a nice, good thermometer like this. And so I always felt like I couldn't control the temperature. That's why I don't do a lot of frying. One, it can kind of make things messy, but two, I never knew exactly what temperature of oil I was working with. And so by having this, we're at 125, I feel really empowered that yes, we can do this. I'm gonna grab out some chopsticks because when I was watching videos on how to do this, a lot of people used 2 chopsticks to flip their donuts. So that's what I'm gonna do. And we're at 129. So let's get our cake donuts in the batter. We are not gonna get our cake donuts in the batter. We are going to get our cake donuts in this oil. So I've got my, okay, it said they would sink directly to the bottom, which is exactly what happened. And then they'll float back up, I think. I'm gonna put 4 in there. And I'm gonna remember, hopefully, oh, there it goes. That's the first one I put in. And I need to put a timer for, I need to check, oh my goodness, okay, let's see. I've got the recipe pulled up here. 335 temperature. Oh, so it wasn't quite hot enough, but that'll be okay. 2 minutes. They'll sink to the bottom at first, but then they'll float to the top after 5 to 10 seconds. Flip after 2 minutes, and then cook for 30 to 60 seconds. Okay, so they're up. So I've got a timer. I probably could have put 5 in here. We're starting to see some cracking, which is very signature of a cake donut or an old-fashioned donut. Our temperature now is at 144, so I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. I don't want this to get too hot. I'm just going to take a quick peek. Okay, so it could get a little bit more golden on that side. This was the first one I put in. Could get a little bit more golden. The crack is getting significantly bigger, which is very signature of a cake donut. I have a cookie sheet with parchment paper and a drying rack over here because once I take these out of the oil, I am going to put them on that cookie sheet. So we're only supposed to cook them for about 30 seconds on this side. So it really is helpful to have a digital thermometer there. Look at that. They have the signature kind of crack. I always wondered how that happened. This so far seems to be working. Now the biggest key is opening these up and one, tasting them to see if they taste any good, but are they cooked all the way through? That is kind of the big question mark. So maybe what I'm gonna do while I'm waiting for these to cook is I'm just gonna, oh my gosh. Oh my goodness, friend, it is cooked all the way through. One good thing about being the cook is you get to sample it before the rest of them are done. It's very hot. Yum. It still needs the glaze, but wow. Look at that. Making these donuts was so much easier than I anticipated. It felt super intimidating, and it's why I've waited 34 years to make donuts from scratch. And I think it's because the frying part, I didn't grow up frying things ever, and my mom didn't either, and so it felt hard. But it was so easy, and I'm excited I did it because now I have the confidence that I could make so many different kinds and varieties of donuts. I did notice though that these donuts took way longer to cook than the recipe said. It said 2 minutes on the first side and 30 seconds on the other side. And I probably did about 2 to 3 minutes on the first side and a good 2 minutes on the other side. I didn't want them to be doughy on the inside. That was something I was very concerned about, was making sure they were cooked all the way through. So these donuts are still very, very hot. It said to glaze these donuts while they were still hot. And so I am going to dip each one of the donuts that I'm going to put in the chocolate glaze about halfway up the donut, and then the regular glaze I am going to flip and do the entire donut in the glaze. And the chopsticks were definitely the way to go. It made frying them in the fryer and glazing them a lot easier. It wasn't messy, and it was just super, super easy. Now, I don't love a ton of glaze on my donuts, so I did kind of shake them a little bit and let the excess glaze kind of drip off them before I then transferred them onto the wire rack. Now, I have a cookie sheet down with a piece of parchment paper and a wire rack so that any excess can drip onto the parchment paper, and it's going to make the cleanup when I'm done making these donuts a lot easier. I love a little bit of parchment paper to make my life easier. Scrubbing cookie sheets is not my favorite thing to do, especially these really large ones. These are extra large cookie sheets, and they're not my favorite thing to scrub. And so a little piece of parchment paper goes a long way in making cleanup easier. So I do have donuts still cooking on the stove and ones that need to go in. And so I was just kind of going back and forth between glazing and cooking the donuts. These are still the cake donuts. It's so funny. I had no idea how that little crack in old-fashioned donuts appeared. And now that I've done it, I know. And so that's kind of a fun thing. Now, the recipe that I'm following, which I will link both of these recipes down below, did not say for the old-fashioned donuts to make donut holes, but I went ahead and tried making donut holes, and they turned out absolutely delicious and were super easy to do. The biggest thing is they did not take very long to cook, and they wanted to stay on one side. So I took the chopsticks and I was just constantly kind of rolling them in the oil so that they got evenly cooked on both sides, because they did not want to flip and stay on that flipped side. And so it's just a matter of just kind of getting in there and turning them and making sure they cooked evenly. And they took about the same amount of time to cook as the regular donuts, because the thickness is the same as the, whole size donuts. And so it was about 2 minutes on one side and about 2 minutes on the other side, give or take. And I was just cooking them until they were a nice golden brown. And then I used this spider to get them in and out, and that made it really easy. And then I could transfer these donut holes into the cinnamon sugar and shake them around in the cinnamon sugar and put them on the drying rack. And you definitely wanted to make sure that you got these donut holes in the cinnamon sugar while they were still hot so that the sugar would stick to the donut holes. And here, just like that, we have glazed donuts, chocolate donuts, and donut holes. I'd say these look pretty professional for my first try. So we're gonna let those cool. And while those are cooling, I went ahead and I stuck my yeast donuts in the oven with the light on, because they need to proof a little bit more. And my kitchen is kind of cold, so the oven light will add just a little bit of warmth to help them kind of rise a little bit quicker. I turned my oil off because these needed to rise longer, and I just didn't need this getting hotter and hotter. So it's at 225 Fahrenheit right now. And what I'm gonna do, because I need this cookie sheet, is I'm just gonna slip these donuts and donut holes right on off that cookie sheet. And I need this one to glaze these next donuts. And I need this wire rack so when they come out of the hot oil, we can put them on here. So as soon as this comes up to temperature, we can go ahead and fry up these donuts. Now you can really see a difference between the ones that I re-rolled. I am not sure how these are gonna fry up exactly. I probably should have smashed the dough a little bit more together. You can see here, they're a little interesting versus the ones where I cut them out from the first try. We are up to temperature now, so I'm gonna go ahead and get these in here. So Josh is here looking at my donuts, and he just commented that these ones look a little interesting, and these are the ones I had to re-roll. I'll bring you in closer to show you, but they are a little Frankenstein, but they're cooking up, which is good. They'll have more crevices for the glaze to sit in.
Oh, positive spin.
Yes.
Nice.
So the original recipe said to cook these at 350. I turned the temperature down just a little bit to 340, 335, because these ones were a lot thicker. I didn't want them to get too brown before the inside got cooked. You can see how they're kind of Look at that. It almost looks like one of those, what are those called? They're like a croissant donut because they've got all the layers. So now I'm gonna get these donut holes in there. I'm gonna do this the safe way by putting them on here first. So I'm gonna put this aside and I'm gonna bring in my other donuts here. You can see that the temperature got a little bit hotter on these ones because they're a little bit darker. And look how big these are. I hope they're cooked all the way through, but they're beautiful. I mean, these are perfect. So I'm gonna dip the chocolate ones in chocolate. So Josh is here and he is going to give this a taste test. So since these are kind of the funny looking ones, do you want to try, you want chocolate, right? I'm assuming?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, he said, oh yeah. So he's gonna have the one that's kind of like, what are those donuts called that are, it's a croissant.
Like bear claws, but in donut.
Oh yeah, because they have a lot of craggy nooks and crannies.
But these ones look so beautiful though.
They look pretty professional, I'd say, for my first attempt at making donuts. But you know how there's those donuts that you can get? I've never had one. They sound delicious, but they're made, the dough is croissant dough. It's a cronut, something like that.
I'm not familiar.
Not familiar. So I'm gonna try this one because it's the Frankenstein one. My favorite donut is either a glazed donut or a curler, but I think you have to have a special thing to make curlers. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, go for it. It's cooked all the way through. Wow.
Just by its odd appearance.
I kind of like the one that has all these layers to it.
Have you had the other one?
No, but I like this one. I think I should probably set this down because I've not eaten dinner yet.
Yeah, probably not good to fill up on this.
Look how beautiful that is though. Friend, I think we did it. So Josh just gave me some feedback and he's gonna try it again. The chocolate ganache that I used was a semi-sweet chocolate. And so he said that you weren't getting that sweetness. So if I do this again, I should either use milk chocolate to get that sweetness or glaze the entire donut and then just dip the top part in this semi-sweet chocolate. So what we just did is took his donut, put it in the glaze because I don't need that anymore. And so now he just tried it with the bottom half in the glaze, like the powder sugar glaze, and the top half in the chocolate. So what do you think now?
Yeah, that's doing it.
That's doing it?
It was lacking a little sweetness.
It was lacking, yeah, because there's not very much sugar in the actual dough. I think in the whole batch, there's a 1/4 cup of sugar in the dough. So you're really wanting that sweetness from the glaze.
That's why I was really complimenting the texture.
He was,
It's like, ooh, really well baked, like good texture.
if you can't hear him, he's saying that he was complimenting the texture of the donut because it wasn't quite hitting the sweetness level. But you could have told me that. He's so sweet.
I'm just glad you're making donuts. I don't want to.
Josh is just, he wants to encourage me making
I don't want
donuts.
to ruin a good thing.
Yeah. And there we have our donuts. I would say that was successful. So these are the old-fashioned ones right here. These are the glazed ones. We've got the chocolate ones here. I did dip these in the glaze on the bottom so they would have some sweetness. And then we've got chocolate here and I dipped these ones in the glaze on the bottom so that they would have a little bit more sweetness. I'm really glad I took a chance to try to make donuts for the first time. Anytime I try a new recipe when I'm bringing them to someone, you know, it's a little bit of a gamble whether it's gonna turn out or not, and this turned out. I do have a couple recipes saved that I really wanna try that have a vanilla custard inside with lemon curd and one with a triple berry, kind of a quick jam that you make and you fill it. But I kind of wanted to try to get the basics under my belt before I attempted those more complicated recipes. And I honestly think the key was having that big thermometer. I felt confident that I knew what temperature my oil was, so I knew what temperature I was cooking these donuts at. So I'm really encouraged that I am able to check this off and feel more confident moving forward when I want to make donuts. And I have to say, I am shocked at how easy that was. This could definitely become a tradition, maybe for birthdays or something where we want something super special, because it was super easy. And especially if you make one of the doughs where you can chill the dough in the refrigerator and make it a day or two in advance, roll it out and then fry it that morning if you wanted it for breakfast with like eggs and sausage. And I could see this even being a Christmas morning thing because it was so easy. It was way easier than I thought it would be. So if you enjoyed this, I can pop a couple of my other videos here. You can go enjoy it between now and my next upload. If you're new, please consider subscribing because we do a lot of fun cooking experiments. We spend a lot of time in the garden, organizing, cleaning, but mostly we do a lot of cooking and food preservation and just have a lot of fun. So if you enjoyed this, I can pop a couple of my other videos here. You can go enjoy it between now and my next upload. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.